And hello again, the grumpy scientists, Mark Tomerdal and his evil sidekick Bob Dennis have
Yeah.
returned.
Have we started recording already?
Yes, we have.
Crap. Okay.
So if you were going to practice for this, Mark, it's
we
too
need
late.
to. It's hard. We'll, in full disclosure, we normally do grumpy science during what used to be known as happy hour on Fridays. So I am not properly lubricated for this. So
Are there any happy hours left in these
days? No. We're still grumpy.
Pandemics, so. Yeah, they're all grumpy hours now. So here I am.
A lot of things. We got a lot of catching up to do because Bob has been under sedation for a couple of weeks. So
yeah, well, we'll tell you all about that in a subsequent grumpy science. But I did get a total left hip replacement. That's been kind of occupying all of my time, but also doing a lot of other good science. And I thought Mark and I should talk about that a little bit. I was just finishing up the first wave of studies on the effects of PEMF on plants. And Mark is pretty excited about this, I can say, because he always perks up a little bit when I talk about that. But one of the things that we find very interesting, I found very interesting, is that you can apply PEMF onto plant seeds before you've planted them while they're dry seeds that you're just getting ready to plant. You haven't soaked them or anything yet necessarily. And you can actually get a significant changes, an increase in the germination rate and the growth rate we've done strawberries, pepper plants, and right now I'm working on tomatoes and other things like that. So
yeah, what your germination rates? You did germination rates on peppers, and I've got a bunch of those pepper plants growing in my tiny little garden.
Hundreds of them.
A half-acre garden. So
hundreds of them. Yeah, I did. I actually ended up planting one by one individual seeds for strawberries and peppers. One by one, I ended up planting about I think it was about 7,000 seeds total.
Yeah.
One by one.
Yeah. You wanted the statistics to be right. You wanted it.
I wanted it to be a real study, and I randomized it, so I didn't know where things were or anything like that. I mean, which is easy because I'm confused all the time anyway.
Now, did you have university approval to do that study? Did you have the plant's approval?
No, I did not. So I suppose the study's illegal. So this may be an unethical study of plants. On the other hand, no plants were harmed in the course of these studies. They were simply planted.
Yeah, they were. Some of them might have been harmed after they were planted. I had a rabbit in my garden.
Oh, did you? Okay, I don't see. All mine are indoor with a controlled humidity and light cycle and water and everything. So it's a different thing. And Mark has like an open air farm.
So do you see a difference indoors of the ones that were germinated by PEMF versus the ones that weren't? That's my big question.
So we're going to publish this in our journal. We'll put a link to it down below this video, JoSaM, the Journal of Science and Medicine, which you can go and it's all open, publications. You can download them. And in a sometime late this summer, there'll be a paper on plants and stuff like that, maybe early fall, because I want to finish the study. But basically speaking, if you apply just a few minutes of PEMF to seeds before you plant them, you tend to increase the germination rate, and it changes the rate at which the plants grow.
Yeah. So I am very excited because for two reasons. One, because this is a whole nother realm. I mean, biology is biology. Plants and animals share a lot of characteristics, but and this can give us a little bit of insight about what PEMF is doing. But the other reason is because I have a hard time starting seedless watermelon seeds. And so I want the germination rates really low for those. And you improve germination rate on the pepper plants
and strawberries. And the next ones I'm going to do are some beans and seedless watermelon seeds, which sounds like an oxymoron. Because if it's seedless, how do you
they got to get seeds from
somewhere? But their germination rate is extremely low.
Yeah.
For seedless watermelon. So I'm going to go ahead and try those too. And, whatever we see, whether it works or not, we're not trying to prove that it works. That's not science at all. We're trying to see what it does. And so
Right.
far, we've seen beneficial effects. The interesting thing is there's a kind of what's almost, I'll describe it in the paper as a reverse or an inverse hormesis effect, where hormesis is kind of like a little bit of something can have a benefit, but then as you add more and more, it can be toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So the effect
It's
of
like
PEMF on germination is just the opposite. A little bit slows it down.
Yeah.
But then as you do a couple of, 15 minutes or an hour or 2 hours of PEMF, it actually increases the germination rate. But if you only do it for a minute or so, or 30 seconds, the germination rate is actually reduced for peppers anyway. So
like
there's a lot to that.
Yeah. Cool. I was talking to people about nootropics on a nootropics website or podcast or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was explaining the concept of tuning curve. And that's exactly what that is. And it's like, a lot of people think, oh, well, a little bit of a nootropic is good for you, then a lot is really good for you. And using the brain gauge, you can actually see what we've seen as tuning curves, and caffeine's the best example. So a lot of people have had experience with, well, not enough caffeine in the morning. And then, the right amount of caffeine makes you pretty optimal, but too much caffeine can really make you do pretty terrible. So anyway, we're very excited about not just what Bob didn't mention was the journal that we have is supported by our new company. So we have a joint company between Micropulse and Cortical Metrics, which is now called fluxhealth. And the inspiration of this is that we want to provide more of a community, or provide, I don't know, how do you say this? We want to have more information. And we get excited about things like journals and reaching out to people and having a forum and hearing how everybody's using, both PEMF and the brain gauge, which are sometimes, often used together. So anyway, we're pretty pumped, and the journal is doing really well. We've got over 20 papers already. It's just trucking along, and we're getting some really quality submissions. And Bob's papers.
Yeah, and I put in some papers too.
Even though Bob published some.
Yeah, there's some really good quality papers, and I published a few as well. So there's we've got a pretty good mix in the bag of different scientific topics, as well as variable quality level, like you're gonna see anywhere. But what's really great about the journal is it's peer reviewed, so we don't just publish any rubbish. I've had a couple of my papers thrown back to me now at this point, saying, you need to work out this detail or that detail. So it's not just any junk. It's
something to do with the first one you put in. I kind of threw it back at you.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I've had things thrown back at me before, but the thing is, it's genuine peer review. People, papers can get rejected. We have actually declined, because Mark and I are both editors as well. We've both declined some topics, like we don't talk about things where we don't think that there's a contribution to be made, and people there's literally no contribution. However, if somebody says something that we don't agree with, but it's potentially quite an important contribution, that's different. Mark and I, unlike editors of almost any other journal, we publish stuff we don't agree with.
Right. And so one of the points of our journal that is one of the reasons we have a journal is because we're both fans of the old school journals. If you go to Journal of Physiology or something like that back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, people actually reported their data, drew some, and then wrote their opinion about it. Now we're having fights with reviewers all the time, and these other so-called prestigious journals. We think our journal is very prestigious. I mean, after all, it is the Journal of Science and Medicine, which is kind of all-encompassing.
Pretty high up there, yeah. Well, this is the thing, a lot of journals have become very controversy averse. They do, risk averse. They don't want to talk about any topic unless it is already well established. They want you to publish the newest, best stuff there. But what they mean by that is like a reaffirmation of what everybody already believes. And if you try to tell them, hey, here's something real, here's a real problem, here's a real thing that will change the way we view science, or in the case that Mark and I have, here's a thing that more or less invalidates data for the last 50 years in an entire field of research, which Mark and I have been
Yeah.
trying to publish now for a couple of months.
Yeah.
They are, you can show them
Well,
solid.
the first rejection of that paper, was actually not a big journal. It was, basically, yeah, we were we used robotics to show the fidelity of different measuring systems.
Yeah.
And basically the first version of it went in and it was rejected by an editor, did not even go out to a review, did not go to a reviewer. And the reason was, he said, we did not take into account gender with our robotics testing.
We didn't get any female robots.
So we were trying to be very clean and say we took out the human element. We wanted to compare measurement systems, and compare the brain gauge to a bunch of other systems. And he just said, no, you're not looking at gender.
I think there was another agenda hidden there. I think the findings that we got were findings he did not want to see. The findings essentially were that people have been using computer and then internet-based systems for this kind of testing.
Yeah.
That increasingly all of their data is really flawed.
Right.
And a lot of that had been published in their journal, and a lot of that forms the basis for a lot of current.
There's literally tens of thousands of papers that, well, they're kind of crap. And, it's just another statement, sort of like, when was that? PNAS about 10 years ago came out with somebody came out with a paper said 95% of all publications are wrong. So
Ioannidis, I think that was 2005, and I think he's at Stanford. I don't remember, but yeah, it's like, strictly on the argument of a statistical analysis and experimental design, most of the papers that are published are wrong. But it turns out that if you're an instrumentation person, you can say, no, it's not just the statistics that's used on the data, but the actual instrument used to collect the data in the first place. That also makes many scientific publications wrong. And in the case that Mark and I found, where they're using internet-based studies, physiologic measurements, they're really wrong. And we're talking basically 100% of the papers that use that method are just wrong.
Yeah.
And that's been going on for many years now, many decades, about 5 decades, 4.5 maybe. And it just gets more and more wrong every year. But it's, something that's easily corrected if you know how to make a measurement. But anyway, so
one of the questions I got from this nootropics group, they said, well, there's a lot of papers showing that these nootropics work, and based on like reaction time measurements, and are they wrong? And I said, well, if you take 1,000 people and put them under one condition and 1,000 controls, you can tease out a difference, even if you have a really inaccurate measurement. But if you go to a doctor and they take a measure, they're never going to say, let me collect data on another 1,000 patients and then I'll get back to you.
So what you're saying is basically like this huge error that's been introduced into the scientific research has made it possible, if you're looking at hundreds of people or thousands of people, the noise and the errors still allow you to see differences between groups.
Right.
But you can't take individual measures that are really meaningful.
So it's not very translational.
But properly measured, this physiologic measurement gives you a really nice, solid, repeatable number.
Right.
That you can use for individual measures and allows you to compare much smaller changes and much smaller variability between much smaller groups if you just make the measurement right. So one of the big things that medical scientists have done over the last 6 decades is they've tried to use statistics to whitewash their inability to actually make a good measurement.
Right.
So if you're making really noisy, crappy measurements and you want to see a difference, you have to make lots and lots of measurements to show a difference between two noisy things. But if you've got really good, solid measurements, then you only need to make a few measurements to show a small change. But statistics, this is one of the many ways that statistics is used incorrectly, which is to to say that something's inherently noisy in a statistical process, which it oftentimes is not if it's
Right.
measured properly.
This leads us to one of our favorite topics to be grumpy about, which is, well, what does NIH funding do? Do they work towards a solution? The majority of the research does not really work towards a solution that works for like a accurate measurement for one person to look at differences. The tendency is to support research that shows trends, no matter how sloppy it is. And if you show that trend, that you'll get another 5 years of funding to show those trends again. And that's basically what's going on in concussion research for the last 15 years. The same people every year. You go to these meetings every year. Well, we just need another 5 years of research funding.
Every year, it's just always 5 years from now. It's like chasing. It's a lot like chasing a rainbow.
Yep.
It's like it's always the same distance away from you.
I don't know, dude. I think chasing a rainbow may be more viable. So
actually, it is, than doing things the way they've been doing it in concussion research, which has been so deeply flawed. But Mark's sort of highest level point here is when you find the problem and you put your finger on it, and you say, this is what everybody's been doing wrong for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Yeah. Because there are entire careers, that are based on the wrong way to measure things.
Yeah. Anyway,
there are whole scientific disciplines now based on bad measurements. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, while we're on the topic of journals, reviewers, and whatever, and good papers and stuff on our Journal of Science and Medicine, let's show one of the papers that Bob actually got published on the journal. Let's show the figure.
Yeah. So this is what Mark wanted to talk about is this right here. So this is a paper that I had published in our journal. This is figure 3 from that paper. And what we're doing here is we're going to give you an example of something we're going to invite everyone to do, which is case studies. If you actually measure something, you keep track of something, and you have data, and you want to show how a case progressed when you did something, that's a case study. And we, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but we have staff who can help people write papers.
Absolutely.
And they can write, you can write a paper like this.
Through the process, and if you want to publish in a peer-reviewed journal, your experience, and like if you're recovering from a TBI and you want to show how brain gauge can be used to show recovery, or if you're trying out nootropics or supplements,
whatever you're doing, power to the people. So we're the first scientific journal to, I think, open arms wide to
or in the
people.
Case of Bob Cat, you've got cat renal failure, and that's,
so this was really a study initiated by my brother John, and he had a cat that got really sick in at the end of 2014. He took it to the vet, and the vet said, "Oh, your cat has a sort of pretty advanced stage 1, maybe / stage 2 renal insufficiency," which happens to a large number of cats, like a third or maybe half of cats. As they get older, their kidneys start to fail, right? And that's measured by creatinine, all right? So creatinine is this measurement here. This is the measurement of creatinine as a function of the date. So each black dot is a measurement taken by my brother's cat's veterinarian. And the first day he took it, he had never used PEMF before on the cat. The cat was getting really sick, took it to the vet. They measured its creatinine, and it was 2.8. And then he started using PEMF on it. What's that?
I said that would be a bad number.
That's a really bad number. Now 5 usually means death. And when you're down around like below about 1.5, that usually means you're getting healthy again. Okay, 1.5, 1.6 is the normal range. So this colored bar along the bottom here shows red indicates no PEMF used, and then green says, yeah, we're using PEMF, and then red means he stopped using it, and then green means he started using it again. And we're correlating this all with calendar dates, right? And my brother just took all this data. He kept all the data like how often did he use the PEMF, and then when did he take his cat into the veterinarian, and what were the results? And he just gave me a table of data, and he said, "Do you think this is interesting?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, it's interesting," right? And then here, where it goes from sort of yellow to red, that's when my brother started getting lazy for about a year in 2016, 2017. And he was using PEMF, then he sort of kind of trailed off and stopped using it. And then he went to the back of the vet. His cat's creatinine was starting to climb up again. And so let's look at this. Whenever he wasn't using PEMF from the very beginning, his cat started to get pretty bad renal insufficiency. Then he started using PEMF, problem went away. He stopped using PEMF and started creeping back up. He started reusing PEMF, it went away again. He started kind of tapering off and getting lazy, and then it kind of plateaued and got worse again. And then he started using PEMF again regularly on his cat twice a week for 20 minutes, and the cat's creatinine went back to normal. Now, why is this amazing? Because it turns out that there is no known treatment for cats and renal insufficiency that does this. Any vet will tell you that the best you can do is palliative care, like make your cat comfortable, make sure it knows you love it, give it a nice, warm, cozy environment, and just let it suffer until it dies. That's the best they can give you. And they will sometimes do crazy expensive things, but every single cat owner who I've shown this to either has or knows someone who's had a cat who's died of kidney failure. And every single one told me that the first 2 visits to their veterinarian cost more than one of our PEMF systems from fluxhealth. And the fact that we could reverse it. Now, okay, you can argue statistically, this is one cat. This is one study with one cat.
Yeah.
But N of 1, you start somewhere. And this is just one study. We're going to be looking at a couple more cats. But as individuals, this is a case study, right?
Well, how much, can you remind everybody, tell everybody if you haven't already, wasn't this cat just like you just having the cat sit on the coils
He just had a cat sit on his lap, and he put the coils on. I show you a picture of how he's doing it. And as the cat sat in his lap twice a week for about 20 minutes, he'd hold the PEMF coils right over its kidneys. And the renal insufficiency would go away for as long as, for the period of time over which he was using PEMF, there was a decline. And when he was not using PEMF, there was an increase in renal insufficiency. So this to me is very compelling because there is no other known way. And my brother tried everything. He tried all the Chinese herbs and the acupuncture and the expensive blood treatments they will do with cats. None of that worked, right? Until he had tried the PEMF. And, and he had still been doing some of the herbs and some of the other, dietary changes. And it just made his cat miserable. His cat hated it. At the very beginning, and then he just stopped doing that. He just the only thing he was changing was using PEMF, and this is the result he got. So the sort of the low level take home story here is, yeah, you can show in individual cases, if you make a good measurement, you can show in individual cases how you have an improvement. And if you keep that data and you organize it intelligently, you can make a case study. And then the high level thing we're trying to tell you is, if you do that for whatever, if you cancer or treating, your own cat with PEMF, or you're doing some other thing, if you're making a measurement, something you can measure, some number, something we can plot, and then you share it with us, we can actually help you write that into a case study. And then you can publish it. Then you'll be a published researcher, right, in Journal of Science and Medicine. So that's what my brother did. I helped him publish this, and we got a paper together. So basically, the point here is that people, citizen science, Mark and I are in favor of that. If you're intelligent enough to measure what you're doing, and you either, however it turns out, if it doesn't work, people want to know that too. What were the conditions? If you're intelligent enough to do it in a way that could be repeated by somebody, in a way where you're keeping track of things and you're measuring something, and you have some kind of an outcome, good, bad, or otherwise, that's a case study. And those and as those collect over time, that becomes very compelling information.
Yeah, and then you write a review of all the case studies, or we'll write a review of all the case studies, and that'll be even more compelling. Basically
called a meta-analysis, right? Where you're looking at a study that studies a bunch of studies, and you do a meta-analysis, and you say, well, If you look at, nobody did a double-blind placebo-controlled study, but you do a meta-analysis and you look at a bunch of individual cases. You take a disease that's incurable completely, feline renal insufficiency, and you show 8 or 10 or 12 cases where in each individual case you were able to reverse it by doing something. Now you've got a pretty compelling argument. You got something real there.
Yeah.
Right. And you're always, no matter what in science, you're always going to have some people saying, no, I don't believe it.
No.
And that's fine. Right? Because the world has shown us that about 1/3 of all adults are, what's the word I'm looking for? Idiots.
Brain freeze.
Yeah. And they will not listen to data and they will not change their mind. It's about 1/3 of all adults just simply will not change their opinion based on any amount of information. And the more you tell them, the more they dig in and hold to their beliefs. And it's about 1 out of every 3 people. So those people we
lost
can't.
1/3 of our viewers, so now we're down.
Yeah,
to
no
2
kidding.
viewers.
So now we're down to what? 1? Okay, the person who's left, that person, we can help you actually make progress and do something. But 1/3 of people, you just don't waste your time because you're never going to convince them. The only thing that you can do is move forward. And the funny thing is, if you move forward far enough and you just embed it into the reality that the other 2/3 of us live in, the original third will eventually swing around and tell you that it was their idea in the first place. That's what's beautiful about brain freeze.
Yeah.
They're going to be the ones who are like, hey, I thought all along something like that ought to work.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
Anyway, so is there anything else we wanted to talk about? We wanted to invite everybody to
around the idea about having a live Grumpy Science or 2, maybe at random times.
Yeah.
And, maybe during Grumpy Hour, and just opening it up for questions. We'll keep everybody de-identified, and we'll probably have to do it on something like YouTube Live or whatever you call it.
We'll give you an email link or something at some point, or you can go to our Flux Health and contact us there. I suppose if you do,
it'll be posted on the Flux Health website whenever we have a Grumpy Science.
We can put you on our mailing list if you just request it. Just say, I'd like to be on the mailing list.
So it wouldn't be hard for us to handle that email.
No, and then we can email things to you about all the really tremendously world-shaking events that are coming up from Flux Health. Like, for example, we were grumpy and we remain grumpy, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to record it. And we're going to have a live Grumpy Science where we will invite people to get their grumpy mojo going with us.
And as long as they answer a question about science or engineering, there's a pretty good chance we can make up a good answer. Now,
I can make up all kinds of crazy stuff about science. We don't want to talk about politics, even though we want to talk about politics. We won't talk about politics. We won't talk about anything that's irresponsible to talk about, or we'll try not to. But when it comes to sort of the basic conduct of science and some of the products and technologies Mark and I are working on, we're totally happy to talk to people about it. So we'll invite you to that. We'll put some kind of a link on here or something. Or you can go to fluxhealth.co, fluxhealth.co, and visit us there too. Okay?
Right. And if we can't get anybody on, we'll just we'll start reading the recipes or something.
We'll just carry on. We'll get some of our friends to call and pretend like we don't know them, and they can ask us, loaded questions that we know we can answer. Those are all tricks that we can use, but don't force us to do that. Go ahead and actually contact us, and we'll do our best to get you on and on a Grumpy Science Live. Okay?
You bet.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
You bet.